surprised everybody wasn't able to see that.
The federal government defines small businesses as 500 to 1,500 employees. I don't think I ever worked for a company that had over 500 employees. Anyway, do you think the federal government should provide any help to businesses who are less than 500 employees?
Then what type of help are they providing?
Well, Small Business Administration, right now, small business that we consider small businesses, I don't know everybody, unless you're working out there and see, oh, wait a minute, they're not here anymore. Okay. Have less than 500 employees. But it's very hard now for small businesses with 25 employees or 50 employees or even 100 employees for that matter to get any help from the federal government through Small Business Administration. Do you have any comments?
Well, you know, Small Business Administration helped me through the retirement program. I learned a lot of their building when I was first opening my business. I think that's a good program. So I wouldn't want to ruin that by distorting what they do through the federal government, because if they get funding and they can help with the SBA loans, I've never applied for one. I always felt that if you don't have the money, you don't spend it. So I never asked for any loans from the federal government. However, I know that there are a lot of businesses that need that capital. So I would try and stay, I would have to research it and see how much they've been delving into small business and go from there.
Talking about having the money to keep running your business, how do you think Congress, federal government, should address the issue of too big to fail financial institutions?
There should not be a too big to fail. I have opened businesses where I failed. I mean, this isn't my first business. This is the business that I love, 13 years in healthcare. But you have to really have a passion for that business, and you have to really want to make that work. And that's on the individual level. I mean, too big to fail is what's wrong with the Dodd-Frank bill, and it's giving a competitive edge and picking winners and losers to the federal government, and that's just not fair. The progressives talk about fairness, but they don't really show it too much in their policies.
Now I'd like to take questions from the audience. Jim?
Yeah.
Would you come up and...
My big complaint about, well, either party for that matter, but particularly Republicans, is that they don't explain simple, well, they're not simple, but they don't make it, they don't make explanations of economic issues plain enough for the average person to understand. So would you mind explaining to us how does lowering taxes increase federal or at any level, but in particular, let's talk about how does lowering taxes increase receipts to the federal government?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Yes, the reason is that taxes are a very complicated issue because they've made it that way on purpose, in my opinion, because nobody would want these regulations that they have. Now, as far as federal taxes, when you get your paycheck and you see the FICA and all your state and local taxes in there, you're getting 6.2% is being given to Social Security. Not right now, because Obama lowered that to 4.2%. That is matched by your employer. So let's just take that $400 check that I was telling you about earlier. All right, you're talking about 6.2% for Social Security, 1.45% for Medicare. Both of those taxes are federal taxes. Your boss matches those two numbers. So your boss would be saving on every employer that made $10 an hour, worked 40 hours a week, your boss would be saving up to $60, depending on your local taxes and everything, up to $60 every week on every employee. So if you have 10 employees, that's $600 a week. That's $600 a week that could be going and invested into another employee, or lower the rates that they charge the consumer. Did I explain that easy enough or no? See, because when you start a business, you're looking at what your upfront costs are going to be before you can even know what you're going to charge for your product or your service. So taxes, federal taxes are going to cost you $10, like in my case for the service industry, $10 to $12 an hour. For me to make any type of money on top of that, I have to realize that I have to add an additional 6.2% onto that 10 and 1.45% onto that 10, along with any overhead for rent, electric, and gas. Does that make sense better to you, or?
This is what you need to master the answer to that question, because
that's the answer.
The simplistic answer is you get it just tax the rich, and that'll take care of the problem. It won't.
Well, that's because that's propaganda. And propaganda works for the progressives.
Rebut it. Rebut it.
Well, you can't rebut something. You can't rebut a talking point. That's how they get away with this stuff. That's why the Tea Party exists, so they can educate the public to what's happening in your taxes. And if you want me to rebut it, I have to explain to you. If you're not understanding, I can sit down and talk to you afterwards. I can't sit here and talk back and forth, though, because these people have an agenda.
I won't cut it.
Okay, well then you need to vote for the other guy, who's not going to explain it to you at all.
Can't hear you.
The question was, in 2010, when we voted in the Tea Party Congress, we were all very high on that, it was great. And then 2011, when some major issues came before the Congress, I think you got wishy-washy on these. And I'm not going to ask you when you get wishy-washy, because I know you won't. I'm going to ask you a question. They were faced with the debt limit. And I was one that wanted the Congress, especially our Tea Party Congress people, to stand firm and say, no, the debt limit is there, it's stopped, we're not going to go past that. A lot of our Tea Party can pay for this in Congress, full. What would you have done in that situation?
I would have voted no to a debt increase, period. I don't believe in that. I understand your frustration. And I think you can fix that by getting more of a Senate in 2012. They didn't have the backing. You need more of the conservatives that are going to stand their ground to be in there. And that's the only way to fix it.
There were congressmen who were Tea Party favorites, who were in there, who folded. They could have stood their ground.
Okay,
and if you go in there, that's what I would like you to say, is, hey, I'm not going to be pragmatic on this. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic, sometimes you don't. But on this one, I'm standing my ground, and I'm not going to raise the debt.
Right, but you also have to understand that we may have elected Republicans to office. They weren't necessarily Tea Party people. That's the difference. We elected Republicans because they stood more to what we believed in. We didn't have a choice. This time around, we have tons of Tea Party people around, tons of people that are conservatives. And if you think for 1 minute that my members aren't going to hold me accountable, you know, I mean, go along with them, right?
I'm sure you're aware that the approval in Congress is running at about 10 to 12% by the electorate. This is an incredible document, but there's a page missing. The page that's missing is, unless we come to grips, we need a constitutional amendment for a couple of things. One, the term limitations, because it's a career. Our founding fathers did not realize this. I think they believed that somebody would come, they would serve their country for 1, 2, 3 terms, and then go back to their farm or their homes. That's number one. Number two, a constitutional amendment for balanced budget. Absolutely. Everything that Congress votes on the American people, they should be subject to also, such as leadership. Both parties that stagnant, and the House does a better job than the Senate. The Senate is absolutely stagnant with Harry Reid, the obstructionist in there.
So,
We need changes.
so what's your question?
So my question is, how do you feel about what I have said? I mean, do you feel that, and I know to give up a career, it's very difficult, but we really need that constitutional amendment for term limitations is absolutely critical.
Thank you for the question. So we have term limits, and we have constitutional amendment for balanced budget, and there was one other.
Yeah, that Congress should be subject to all the laws that they pass.
Okay. Term limits, you're not going to like my answer. I believe in a part-time legislature with no pensions, no benefits, just a salary. So with that said, they would keep the job that they currently have, and I would keep my own business and then work certain weeks out in Washington, and that would be it. We are supposed to be elected to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not fundamentally transform the country. So it's not a term limit per se, but it's a part-time legislature. That's what I believe. Congress being subject to the laws they create, well, absolutely. That's just, you know, a given. I would absolutely support something like that. Well, it's a given that it should be, in my opinion. So, I'm sorry, did I get I'm missing one. Balanced budget. Yes, I do. It's just there was so much coming out through that I was trying to follow up on that Balanced Budget Act. And I really want to make sure that it's not going to tie our hands in time of war. And that was one of the issues that was brought up in our Tea Party. So that would be the one thing that would concern me because, I mean, we all know 9/11. So you can't tie the hands of Congress in that type of situation. We could, but like I'm saying, it would have to go to the floor and be debated. And once there was a debate on that, then I would have to, you know, make sure that that was a part of it. Keep doing it.
That somebody's got to start the process. It's 5 to 7 years ago.
Well, we'll keep working on it. That's all I have.
Yes, my question to you, George Washington said that parties could be the end of our country. Do you agree with that or disagree? And do you think that the Tea Party is a party or a movement? Your answer is no.
The Tea Party is the American people joining together to stop tyranny in our government today. Just one thing. As for George Washington's statement on the two parties, well, they could be. We've seen that. We've seen it happen. We saw progressives invade both the Democratic and Republican Party. We got rid of most of them. The American people did that. And if the American people are not educated, that's when the parties can destroy the country. And that's why the Tea Party continues to focus on education of the electorate. And that's why we read school books throughout our districts and see what our kids are learning. And find out if it's fact, or if our history has been wiped out to the point of no return. And we've been finding, unfortunately, some bad things in our books. And we have to fix it as the American people. When the American people stand united, that's when we stay free. That's what we're trying to maintain.
First of all, the answer to the question over here, lower tax rates stimulates the economy,
Yes.
generates more income to the federal government, works every time it's tried. You need to build.
Is that all you wanted? I was trying to give you an actual answer. I couldn't give you that. I didn't understand it.
That's the elevator pitch you've got to be able to deliver.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Big news today is a dramatic decrease in the unemployment rate as reported. Can you comment on that number in context of all the other economic news that's been released in the last several days, including the very bad numbers in manufacturing, the very bad numbers throughout? Okay, so in context of the rest of the economic news, what do you think of 7.8% unemployment?
I do not believe that number. I do not trust anything that I see in the media today. I do not believe anything unless I research it myself, and I tell other people not to believe a word I say unless they research it as well. I think that people need to get involved and look it up themselves, figure it out for themselves, in order to understand what the numbers actually represent. I mean, Dick Morris sent something out, and he was talking about the polls that are coming out now. And he's looking at percentages and how they have a certain percentage of Democrats and a certain percentage of Republicans. And obviously the Democrats are higher than the Republicans. So it's a skewed poll. Now, can I say that with factual statement? I believe Dick Morris. I believe he researched that. But I should look those numbers up, and I should go and delve into that myself. And normally I would if I weren't running for Congress right now. But literally, I have been a questionnaire of the media since 2007, when I had a friend of mine say to me, "Laureen, this guy Barack Obama is really a fresh new face. You should look him up and vote for him." And I said, okay. So I got on the internet and I researched him. Scared me to death.
I'm sorry. I'll ask you a quick question. You're standing up here alone. Unfortunately, your opponent didn't come through. Could you give me a little synopsis of your opinion of your opponent and where you stand and what issues you are in great contrast, or if there are issues that you're in great contrast with?
Yes.
Who your opponent is?
Yes. My opponent is Attorney Matt Cartwright from Lehigh County. He is a trial attorney, and he is completely opposite of what I believe. He believes that Obamacare did not go far enough, that there should be a public option. He believes that we need to bring back the assault weapons ban. He believes we should have limited ammo purchases. He believes that the Tea Party is someone that needs to be destroyed. So how he can say that he's going to work with Congress out there is beyond me, because there's a bunch of Tea Party members out there now. On every issue, one after another, he is the extreme opposite of what I believe. So you cannot get a more stark difference in opponents than my race. You just can't. It's completely obvious, and he is very willing to talk about it, and I'm happy about that, and that is why I love our First Amendment. Because I want to hear what he believes. I want to know what he believes. And I want other people to know, so that they can make an informed decision. And that's what I think of my opponent.
I wanted to mention the other part of lowering taxes, what it does. It takes people off of welfare and food stamps, things like that. So the money isn't going out of the federal government either. So there's a two-part to that by stimulating the economy by lowering taxes. So that said, you sound tonight almost as conservative as me. And you said in your presentation in the beginning that you were a Democrat some 9 years ago. How could you possibly have been a Democrat if you talk the way you do now?
Well, as I told you, I grew up in a foster home with very loving parents. So they were very good foster parents. They were Democrats. And most of Lehigh County is Democrats. And I was told that Democrats are for the little guy and that Republicans are only for the rich people. And then when I, as I said, opened my business and saw the truth about paychecks and how they are written and what the employer actually does spend on their employees and how much it does cost when they have regulation, I started to learn when I was on the wrong side of the fence. That's how I changed into a Republican in the beginning. Unemployment, workers' comp, payroll law, it is unrelenting. It's unrelenting. Right now, we just got slapped with an unemployment bill because of how much money we borrowed from the federal government. And businesses have to pay that money back. That is given to the businesses under a state unemployment bill and under a federal unemployment bill. So, small businesses, as Joe Biden said, you know, they're being creamed. They're getting crushed. The middle class, which is me, is getting crushed. I learned my lesson. I won't go back, trust me.
First of all, full disclosure, I'm working in Laureen's campaign. But now, I have a comment regarding the unemployment compensation figure, the unemployment rate figures. I really do not question the integrity of the figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics because they've been using the same formula since the days of Franklin Roosevelt. But what I do question is the media spin saying that this did not drop because of discouraged workers. Because many, many times I have heard the Democrats say, you have to create at least 150,000 jobs per month simply to stay even. If you create fewer than that, you're going to see unemployment rise. Now, everybody acknowledges only 114,000 jobs were created in the past month, and yet the figure shows a 0.3% drop in unemployment. Do you believe, as I do, that that is attributable mainly to discouraged workers?
Well, John, I would have to look at their, like I said, you have to look at where they're getting those numbers from. And even when they're reporting at 8.1%, they're not counting in people who just stopped looking for work altogether. How many of those people went on to disability? How many of those people went on to welfare? We don't know. So you really have to delve into the research and find out where those numbers are coming from before you can give an accurate account of them. And that's just the way I look at it.
All right, we're going to stop the questions for now. Laureen is going to sum up. She's got 5 minutes to sum up, 4 minutes to sum up anything she wants to talk about.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the assistance on taxes. I appreciate it. I'm not one to mince words. I usually say what I believe, and that's about it, and that's what you get from me. So I don't use talking points. I always just answer and speak from my heart. But there is something that I would like to share that you've all probably read many, many times. And it comes from our Declaration of Independence. And I have to tell you that prior to me getting involved with the Tea Party, the Declaration of Independence to me just meant that we, stated our independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And that's what I remembered from it. But it also goes on to talk about what the king had done to all of the founders. And that's why they wrote the Declaration of Independence. And it's interesting when you read that it says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. So while they're tolerable, they can put up and dispose of that suffering, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. That's right where the progressives want us to be, where we progressively get to a point where we're used to gas prices being $4 a gallon. We're used to our groceries being at these points. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government.
That's right.
And to provide new laws for their future security. That's why I stand here before you today. I've had enough. I've had it with the regulations, I've had it with the taxes, I've had it with watching people suffer. I do not want our children to think $4 a gallon gas is the norm. It is not the new norm. It will not be the new norm forever, and we will stop it in November. And I can use your help. I'd appreciate it if you can go to my website at www.electLaureenCummings.com or on Facebook, Laureen Cummings for Congress. Please help me to make this happen for us all. Not for me, not for you specifically,